Hi, glad you could join me. So I'm coming to you a bit earlier this week. This is one of those where it's like a bonus, huh? Just something that pitches up and we try and discuss it. So I think a number of people have asked me what my thoughts are about the team that has just been named for Zambia. And so I thought about just doing a short clip, hopefully under 10 minutes, of just looking at the key factors that maybe a coach looks at when they're trying to call up a national team. Obviously, we need to note that there's never really been any selection that has always pleased 100% people. There are always going to be issues here and there. People are going to be uncomfortable about certain call-ups, and then they're going to be calling for others to be called up. Chiefly because we look at the game differently. But if you've been watching the game for a long time and have followed football for a long time, you realize that there's never really been any national team selection that has pleased everyone. That could be really a rarity and maybe an exception to the norm. The other thing that we need to understand, what I believe strongly in, is that when a selection is made, I think it's just important that we support whatever has been put up, because those that are handling the team thinks that is the best combination that is going to get them the results. And there's no coach really that is going to make a selection which they think is going to make them win. I think they look at winning to be both winning a particular football match and also look at maybe their tenure and look at what is going to give them the results, both in the present and also with the long-term eye. So without further delay, what are some of the qualities that a coach is going to be looking at as they call up a team? The first thing is really about the quality and the depth of the selection pool. So we have to understand that you can only call from what you have. You can only call from what qualifies to play for you. And in national teams, that's where the first limitation for a coach comes in. So you can only call from those that are part of your country, for example, and part of those that qualify. Now, in the modern day, we know that there's a lot of naturalization going on, and so we've seen this happening as well. So that, in a way, adds to the selection pool. But really, you cannot go beyond what your selection pool has. You cannot go beyond the quality and the depth of your selection pool. And at times it's about what is in your selection pool, what is going to give you the result in the immediate, and what is going to give you the result in the long term. And so that is, I think, the first thing that a coach is going to consider. There are times that people are going to be calling for more. Sometimes you hear people say, are these the players that can be playing for the national team? But well, look, maybe based on the selection pool that you have, these are the guys that are available, and beyond that, maybe the coach cannot really get anyone else. And so sometimes they'll look at what they have and pick from there. Obviously, like I said, it's never going to please everyone, but then you have to work with what you have. Chief among the other factors that the coach will consider is his playing philosophy, and as well as there are certain countries where they actually have a particular national philosophy. They actually going to consider that. In a case where you don't have a national philosophy, then you have to look at the coach's philosophy in totality. Now, in the most basic terms, what is the coaching philosophy? The coaching philosophy is basically a collection of beliefs and thoughts as to how one thinks that things are supposed to be done, or they are supposed to go about certain things. Now, coaches want to play in a particular way and not just in any other way. So there has to be a lot of specificity in how a coach intends to approach matches, and based on that specificity, they begin to narrow down the selection pool. They begin to narrow it down to who qualifies to fit in what they are trying to do. Now, oftentimes I've said this, and I think I'll say it again. Football is a reflection of what someone thinks, what someone believes in, what someone thinks how someone thinks things are supposed to be done, and things of that sort. And so, based on what a coach thinks is supposed to be done, how they think things are supposed to be done, they are going to start picking certain players to fit in those. That is why sometimes it explains certain things where you think a particular player is maybe good enough, but then maybe they do not fit into those boxes that the coach is trying to check, and based on that, maybe they'll miss out on a selection. And so sometimes also a philosophy will be based on certain coaches believe, for example, that there's a lot of strength in possession. Others just believe that there's a lot of strength in maybe just attack. Others believe that there's a lot of strength in just defense. And so based on those, they are going to make their selections. You see this, for example, for the Italian national team. You realize that most when they make a selection, you find that probably they have more defenders than midfielders, or maybe more defenders than strikers. In a lot of teams where they believe that the midfield is a source of strength, you see that they have a lot of midfield combinations as compared to maybe having a lot of defenders and strikers, and it moves in that direction. So based on the coaching philosophy, how a coach thinks matches are supposed to be approached, and how they just want to go about their business, they're going to make a particular selection. Another key thing when you look at the national team selection is the issue of chemistry. I think we cannot run away from this. Remember, when you're calling up national teams, the period for training, especially when you're not preparing for a tournament, is very limited. Actually, you have about maybe 3 to 4 days of training, and maybe 3 to 4 days of training could be about maybe 3-4 sessions at the maximum. And so you need to realize that you have to start from a certain base. And so based on a certain base that you need to start from, not starting from scratch, you have to look at certain combinations that have already maybe worked in the past before, or certain combinations that you have been trying to build. So you want to capitalize on that chemistry and help you get results going forward. Then sometimes it's about possibilities, especially when you look at chemistry. There are certain combinations where they may not really be long-term combinations, but then they are combinations which you think might work. So you say maybe player A, if we combine him with player B, then they can make something work out. And then sometimes there's a curious one where you realize that a certain player can only do better when there's a different player that brings the best out of them. It's normal in football. And so sometimes this guy is going to be invited to the national team chiefly because he brings the best out of a very particular key player. When they play together, you are going to see things work out. And sometimes coaches have got all these things that they have to think about. And sometimes it works that way, that player A has to maybe will probably get the best out of them when you combine them with player C, and maybe this becomes a passport for player C to be part of a national team. One would argue, say, but why should it be the case? Well, if you are trying to win and you're trying to get the best out of your best players, that could be a way that you go going forward. And so it works in that way. Really, chemistry is something that we cannot ignore. The other thing that we cannot ignore, which is very important as well, is form. Now we all know that a player that is on form is enjoying his game. A player that is on form is unstoppable. Form on itself is really a big driver. A player that is on form is a very dangerous player, and then based on the form, you would want to call them to the national team. And remember, like I said earlier on, 2-3 days of training, they are not really the best. It's not really the best period for training. And so if you bring in players that are off form, imagine how long it will take for you to help them to tick. And so based on the fact that maybe limited training there's limited training time available, you may have to rely on form as another key indicator. The other thing that form does is that there's what you call the plug and play kind of situation. This guy is banging goals at his club, just bringing him to the national team. He continues banging goals just because of the high wave that he's riding on. And the guy that's on form basically is just going to give you the results that you're looking for more often than not. But then there are times that people will argue, say there's a player that is on form but is not being called to the national team. Well, what's the cause? And this leads me to the next point, which I call the 50-50. So the 50-50 is like where you have similar players of a similar ilk, or what you call like-for-like players, but then you have to make a choice between player A and player B, because these guys pretty much offer you the same thing. So you have to make a choice: do I go for player A or for player B? And that's where now you begin to look at other micro components that they may bring. Maybe this one has been around for a while. Maybe this one can play better in a particular combination. Maybe this one still need a little of time to adjust and things of that sort. And that's why you see certain players fall off. At present, there's a discussion. There's a player, Ross is banging in the goals. Why is he not being called? Maybe he was being compared to maybe a Fashion Sakala, or maybe he was being compared to maybe a Lamek Banda or things of that sort. So sometimes the 50-50 is going to make certain players fall off and certain players be called into the fold. Then sometimes coaches have to get into the balancing act. For example, here is a very top performing defensive midfielder, and there's a top performing maybe attacking midfielder. Then the coach will look at combinations and look, say, I have enough cover defensively. Maybe I need to add more to the attacking flanks or the attacking side of the game. And so they're going to go for player B and not player A, chiefly because maybe at that particular time they think they need one that is going to offer them more attack-wise, more than one that is going to offer them something defensively. So sometimes certain players fall off because of that. Not really because they are bad players or maybe because they are not liked, but certain, you need to start doing trade-offs if you like. So you trade off this one for this one chiefly because of points A, B, and C, and moving on in that direction. The other thing that coaches will look at is coachability, or tactical discipline, things like tactical discipline, tactical flexibility, if you like, because at the end of the day, a player is expected to go and execute a coach's instruction on the field of play, and so based on their ability to execute instructions, they are going to be caught into the fault or not. Because one thing you need to realize is that throughout the 90-minute period, there are a lot of instructions that are given. It's like a game of chess. You need to keep responding to certain situations that the opponent is giving you. Similarly, you have to create certain situations that the opponent has to respond to. And because of that, you need players that are coachable, players that are going to adjust accordingly, players that are going to be flexible enough. Once players become rigid, or once players are not able to be flexible enough, are not able to adjust to this or to adjust to this requirement in the game, then the team is going to fall off and the team is going to fail to perform. So based on the fact that there has to be a lot of coachability or tactical flexibility or tactical discipline, then certain players are going to follow. There are players that have been called to a camp, for example, and then just simple things they cannot do. They just want to stick to one way of doing things. They cannot adjust to something that is new, and based on that, they are going to fall off. So these are some of the things that happen in the background when the team is being called up. Then we cannot ignore the fact that sometimes the coach is just going to go for match winners. Look, there are certain players that are going to give you a result. The team might not be ticking, but then there's this guy that has a particular level of individual brilliance and is just going to give you results. These are certain players that they may not really be on form, or they may not really be enjoying their football at the moment, but then deep within you are convinced, and based on evidence, statistical evidence and the other forms of evidence, that this guy is able to give us the result that we require in very tough situations. And sometimes you see this kind of players being called up. You wonder sometimes, look, this guy may not even be enjoying the best form at his club, or the last few times that he's been with the squad, maybe he hasn't given us the best of himself. But the coach is just convinced to say, look, when we bring this guy to the squad, he's going to give us what we are looking for. And so it's about meeting the individual quality and what the individual quality is going to do to the collective, how it is going to lift the collective. Because remember, you start from the individual, then you look at a particular department, how someone is going to influence a particular department in a team, and how they are going to influence the whole team. And so if they tick all those boxes, then a coach will do well to invite them to a camp. And then the last one, which is for today, I think the last one is a bit one of those which raise a lot of dust. It's about relationships in any organization, football included. The value of relationships really cannot be underestimated. The value of relationships or the quality of relationships cannot really be overemphasized, and how far they can go in terms of getting you a result. In one of the earliest manuals I read when I was starting out in coaching around 2009 or 2010, somewhere there, a manual I read, there was a quote from Ferguson, Sir Alex Ferguson actually, who said that 60% of what a player is going to give you on match day is purely dependent on the relationship that you share with this player. So if this guy enjoys the working relationship that you have, if this guy values you as an individual, they want to give you the best when they are on the field of play. The other side of relationships is about player-to-player relationships. Teams that are where players are friends, teams where players are close to each other, are really going to give you results. And they want to fight for each other. They are willing to die for each other. So a coach will also be looking at those possibilities and begin to make certain choices, certain trade-offs, and then settle on a particular set of players to be able to do the job for them. So I think in a nutshell, really, that's what I thought I could share today, so that we could make a bit of sense out of the team that has just been selected at present by the Zambian coach, and even maybe in the future, for future references. Really, these are some of the things that coaches are going to be looking at whenever they are making a national team selection. And my thoughts really about the team that has been called is that all these things considered, I think it's a good selection. All these things that I've just spoken about being considered, I think it's a good selection, one that I think we should support. And let's see what the coach has for this team in the long term. Until next time when we meet, bye bye, and enjoy the rest of the day.